Close your eyes and imagine standing at the edge of the world's longest river, the Nile, which stretches an incredible 4,135 miles from the heart of Africa to the Mediterranean Sea. For thousands of years, this ancient waterway has been the lifeblood of civilizations, and tonight, we'll follow its current and the currents of rivers around the world, letting their stories carry us gently downstream. The Nile's story begins not in one place, but two. High in the mountains of Burundi, the White Nile emerges as a modest stream, while far to the north in Ethiopia, the Blue Nile tumbles down from Lake Tana. These two great tributaries travel hundreds of miles before finally meeting at Khartoum in Sudan, where their waters embrace and become one. The Blue Nile, though shorter, contributes nearly 80% of the Nile's water during flood season, carrying with it the rich sediments that once made Egyptian agriculture possible. Speaking of ancient Egypt, the Nile was so central to their existence that the entire civilization rose and fell with its rhythms. Every summer, like clockwork, the river would swell with distant rains from the Ethiopian highlands, flooding the surrounding valleys and depositing a layer of nutrient-rich black silt across the farmlands. The Egyptians called their land Kemet, meaning black land, in honor of this fertile soil, and they organized their entire calendar around the Nile's three seasons: Ake, the flooding; Parait, the growing; and Shimu, the harvest. But let's drift now across continents to another legendary river, the Amazon in South America. The Amazon isn't just a river, it's practically an inland sea, discharging approximately 209,000 cubic meters of water into the Atlantic Ocean every single second. That's more than the next 7 largest rivers combined, a flow so powerful that it pushes fresh water up to 100 miles out into the ocean, creating a visible boundary where brown river water meets the blue Atlantic. The Amazon begins its journey high in the Peruvian Andes, at a glacial stream called Carhuasanta, just 100 miles from the Pacific Ocean. From this humble beginning at over 17,000 feet above sea level, the river descends and gathers strength, eventually traveling nearly 4,000 miles eastward across the entire width of South America. What makes this journey even more remarkable is that for most of its length, the Amazon drops only about 1,000 feet in elevation. It's an incredibly gentle, meandering descent that allows the river to spread wide and nurture the planet's largest rainforest. Now, let the current carry you northward to the Mississippi River, threading through the heart of North America. The Mississippi's watershed is so vast that it drains water from 31 U.S. states and 2 Canadian provinces, covering about 40% of the continental United States. A single raindrop falling in Montana might eventually join the river and travel over 2,300 miles before reaching the Gulf of Mexico. The Mississippi has shaped American history as profoundly as the Nile shaped Egypt's. In the 19th century, before railroads crisscrossed the continent, the Mississippi was America's main highway, with elaborate steamboats carrying cotton, grain, and passengers up and down its length. Mark Twain, who worked as a riverboat pilot in his youth, captured this era perfectly in his writings, taking his pen name from the river itself. Mark Twain was the call boatmen made when measuring the water depth at 2 fathoms, or 12 feet, meaning the water was safe for navigation. Let's float now to Asia, to the Ganges River, which holds a sacred place in the hearts of nearly 1 billion people. Rising from the Gangotri Glacier in the Indian Himalayas at an elevation of about 12,800 feet, the Ganges flows for 1,560 miles through India and Bangladesh before emptying into the Bay of Bengal. To Hindus, the river is the goddess Ganga herself, descended from heaven, and bathing in its waters is believed to cleanse the soul of sins. Every 12 years, During the Kumbh Mela festival, tens of millions of pilgrims gather at the river's banks in what becomes the largest peaceful gathering of humans on earth. These rivers, the Nile, the Amazon, the Mississippi, the Ganges, are more than just flowing water. They are the veins of our planet, carrying life, carving landscapes, and connecting the stories of countless generations. As you rest tonight, imagine yourself floating on their gentle currents, drifting peacefully through time and space, rocked by the ancient rhythms that have shaped our world. As we continue our gentle journey, let us turn our attention to the Yangtze River in China, the longest river in Asia, flowing 3,915 miles from the Tibetan Plateau all the way to the East China Sea. The Yangtze has witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties, and today, it remains home to the Three Gorges Dam, the world's largest hydroelectric power station. This massive structure, completed in 2006, stretches nearly 1.5 miles across the river and stands 600 feet tall, yet despite its impressive scale, the dam has become part of an ancient story, one of humanity's eternal dance with the rivers that sustain us. The Yangtze's power extends beyond electricity. Its basin is home to over 400 million people, nearly a third of China's population, and the river has long been called China's Golden Waterway. For thousands of years, boats have traveled its length, carrying silk, tea, and rice, connecting the interior highlands with the coastal cities where goods would journey onward to distant lands. Even today, the Yangtze is one of the busiest waterways on Earth, with cargo ships and passenger vessels creating an endless procession along its waters. Let's drift westward now, across the vast steppes and mountains, to the Danube River in Europe. The Danube holds a unique distinction. It flows through more countries than any other river in the world, passing through or touching the borders of 10 nations: Germany, Austria, Slovakia, Hungary, Croatia, Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, Moldova, and Ukraine. This beautiful blue ribbon, immortalized in Johann Strauss's famous waltz, stretches 1,770 miles from Germany's Black Forest to the Black Sea, serving as a liquid highway that has connected European civilization since ancient times. The Danube has witnessed empires rise and crumble along its banks. The Romans built fortifications beside it, marking the northern boundary of their vast domain. Medieval castles perch on cliffs overlooking its waters, and the grand cities of Vienna, Budapest, and Belgrade grew wealthy from the trade that flowed upon its surface. But perhaps the most enchanting aspect of the Danube is its delta, where the river splits into countless channels before reaching the Black Sea, creating the second-largest river delta in Europe, a wetland paradise that shelters over 300 species of birds and remains one of the continent's last great wilderness areas. Now, let the current carry you to Africa once more, to the Congo River, the world's deepest river, plunging to depths of over 720 feet in some places. The Congo is the only major river in the world that crosses the equator twice, creating a unique phenomenon. While one part of the basin experiences its rainy season, another part faces its dry season, helping to regulate the river's flow throughout the year. This mighty waterway courses through the heart of the Congo rainforest, the second-largest tropical rainforest on Earth, where its waters are stained a deep brown by tannins from decomposing vegetation. The Congo's power is extraordinary. It carries the second-largest volume of water of any river on Earth, surpassed only by the Amazon, and its flow is so strong that underwater currents in some sections can reach depths of 750 feet. Where the river finally meets the Atlantic Ocean, it has carved an underwater canyon extending nearly 500 miles into the ocean floor, a hidden river valley beneath the waves, a testament to the Congo's relentless force across millions of years. Let us journey now to the Colorado River in North America, a river that may not be the longest or the mightiest, but one that has created some of Earth's most breathtaking landscapes. Flowing 1,450 miles from the Rocky Mountains to the Gulf of California, the Colorado has spent millions of years carving through rock, creating the magnificent Grand Canyon, a chasm up to 18 miles wide and over a mile deep in places. Standing at the canyon's rim, you witness 6 million years of patient work, as the river cut layer by layer through ancient stone, revealing the Earth's history written in bands of red, orange, and purple rock. The Colorado serves as a lifeline for the American Southwest, providing water to over 40 million people across 7 states and Mexico. Its waters irrigate 5.5 million acres of farmland and generate hydroelectric power through massive dams like Hoover Dam and Glen Canyon Dam. Yet this heavily used river faces an uncertain future. In some recent years, the Colorado has been so thoroughly diverted for human use that it no longer reaches the sea, its once mighty delta now a shadow of its former self, a reminder that even great rivers are vulnerable to our demands. Finally, as this segment of our journey draws to a close, let's visit the Rhine River in Europe, flowing 760 miles from the Swiss Alps through Germany and the Netherlands to the North Sea. The Rhine has been Europe's most important commercial waterway for over 2,000 years, and castles line its banks like sentinels from fairy tales. Over 60 castles and fortress ruins watch over the river in Germany alone, built by princes and lords who once controlled trade along these vital waters. The Rhine Valley, particularly the stretch between Mainz and Koblenz, is so culturally significant that UNESCO designated it a World Heritage Site. Here, steep vineyard-covered slopes rise from the river's edge, and the legendary Lorelei Rock marks a treacherous narrows where, according to German folklore, a beautiful siren once lured sailors to their doom with her enchanting song. Today, the Rhine remains busy with barges and cruise ships, its waters continuing to carry the commerce and dreams of Europe, just as they have for millennia. Rest now, and let these rivers flow through your thoughts, their ancient songs a lullaby from the very heart of the earth. As we drift deeper into our journey, let us travel to South America once more, to the Parana River, the second longest river system on the continent. The Parana flows 3,030 miles through Brazil, Paraguay, and Argentina before joining with the Uruguay River to form the Rio de la Plata estuary. What makes the Parana particularly remarkable is the Iguazu Falls, where the river tumbles over a series of 275 individual cascades spread across nearly 2 miles. Eleanor Roosevelt, upon first witnessing Iguazu Falls, is said to have remarked, "Poor Niagara," so overwhelmed was she by the sheer grandeur of these falls, which carry approximately 1.7 million gallons of water per second during peak flow. The Parana River Basin sustains over 100 million people and generates nearly 90% of Paraguay's electricity through the Itaipu Dam, one of the world's largest hydroelectric facilities. But the river is more than infrastructure and statistics. It creates a vast wetland called the Pantanal near its headwaters, the world's largest tropical wetland area, where jaguars hunt along the water's edge and hundreds of species of fish navigate channels that flood and reseed with the seasons, creating an ever-changing aquatic maze. Let us float now to Russia, to the mighty Volga River, Europe's longest river at 2,294 miles. The Volga is so central to Russian identity that it's often called Mother Volga, winding through the heart of western Russia like a silver thread connecting north to south. The river's basin covers about 40% of European Russia and is home to roughly half of Russia's agricultural production. 11 of Russia's 20 largest cities sit along the Volga's banks, including Kazan, Nizhny Novgorod, and Volgograd, the city once known as Stalingrad, where one of World War II's most brutal battles raged while the river flowed on, indifferent to human conflict. The Volga freezes for 3 months each year, transforming from a flowing highway into a solid road of ice. For centuries, this annual freezing shaped Russian life. Trade would halt, and people would wait for spring's thaw as surely as they waited for the sun to return. Today, a series of dams and reservoirs along the Volga have turned sections of the river into what Russians call the Volga Cascade, a staircase of massive lakes that generate hydroelectric power and allow ships to navigate waters that once ran wild and free. The river finally empties into the Caspian Sea through a delta that spreads across 100 miles, creating a maze of channels where lotus flowers bloom in summer and Caspian seals sometimes venture upstream. Now, let your mind travel to Southeast Asia, to the Mekong River, which sustains more people per square mile than perhaps any river on Earth. The Mekong begins in the Tibetan Plateau and flows 2,700 miles through China, Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, 6 countries bound together by these shared waters. The Mekong is one of the world's most biodiverse rivers, home to over 1,200 species of fish, including the giant freshwater stingray, which can weigh up to 1,300 pounds and is one of the largest freshwater fish on the planet. For the 60 million people who live in the Mekong Basin, the river is everything: highway, fishery, farmland, and spiritual center all at once. In Cambodia, the Mekong creates a natural phenomenon called the tunnel sap, a river that actually reverses its flow twice a year. During the monsoon season, the swollen Mekong forces the tunnel sap river to flow backward, filling the tunnel sap lake until it expands to nearly 6 times its dry season size. When the rains end, the river reverses again, draining back into the Mekong. This annual pulse creates one of the world's most productive inland fisheries, providing protein for millions and demonstrating the river's role as the heartbeat of an entire region. Let us journey now to Australia, a continent so arid that its rivers tell a different kind of story. The Murray River, Australia's longest at 1,558 miles, flows from the Australian Alps through the interior, joined by its major tributary, the Darling River, to form the Murray-Darling Basin. This basin covers 1/7 of Australia's land area and produces over 1/3 of the nation's food supply, an incredible feat in one of the driest inhabited continents on Earth. The Murray's flow is highly variable. In wet years it can flood extensively, while in drought years some sections barely flow at all, revealing the river's ancient bed of red-brown earth. The indigenous peoples of Australia, whose cultures stretch back over 65,000 years, have always understood the Murray's moods. They called it different names along its length and knew precisely where and when to find water, food, and shelter along its banks. Today, the river faces enormous pressure from agriculture and climate change, with water allocation becoming one of Australia's most contentious political issues. Yet the Murray persists, home to unique species like the Murray cod, which can live for over a century and grow to over 200 pounds, ancient fish swimming through ancient waters. Finally, let us visit the Thames River in England, a river that may be modest in size, just 215 miles long, but immense in historical significance. The Thames flows through London, and for 2,000 years, this river has been the stage upon which English history has unfolded. The Romans built Londinium beside it, Vikings sailed up it in their longships, and kings and queens built their palaces along its banks. The Tower of London, Westminster, and the Houses of Parliament all look out upon these waters, which have reflected the rise of an empire and the evolution of one of the world's great cities. The Thames was once so polluted that it was declared biologically dead in the 1950s, choked with sewage and industrial waste. But through decades of environmental effort, the river has been reborn. Today, over 125 species of fish swim in waters that were once toxic, and seals have returned to the Thames estuary. This transformation reminds us that rivers are resilient, that they can recover and flow clean again if we choose to protect them. As the Thames flows beneath London's bridges tonight, carrying the tides in from the sea and back again, it whispers a message of hope, a reminder that restoration is possible, that what was lost can sometimes be found again. Close your eyes and feel the gentle rocking of these waters, rivers from every continent carrying you softly through the night, their ancient rhythms a comfort, their stories a peaceful companion as you drift towards sleep. As our journey continues through the world's waterways, let us travel to the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in the Middle East, twin rivers that flow through the cradle of human civilization itself. These rivers rise in the mountains of eastern Turkey and flow southward through Syria and Iraq, eventually merging to form the Shatt al-Arab waterway before emptying into the Persian Gulf. Between these two rivers lay ancient Mesopotamia, meaning the land between rivers, where some of humanity's greatest achievements first took root: the wheel, writing, the first cities, the earliest codes of law. The Sumerians, Babylonians, and Assyrians all built their magnificent civilizations along these banks, understanding that the river's annual floods brought both life-giving water and fertile soil to an otherwise harsh landscape. The Euphrates, at 1,740 miles, is the longest river in Western Asia, while the Tigris flows 1,180 miles, sometimes running parallel to its companion, sometimes diverging, like two old friends on separate but intertwined paths. Ancient engineers built elaborate irrigation systems to harness their waters, creating the famous Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, which relied on an ingenious system of pumps drawing water from the Euphrates to cascade through terrace gardens in the desert heat. Today, these rivers continue to sustain millions, though they face challenges from drought, damming, and the weight of providing for an ever-growing population in an increasingly arid region. Now let your thoughts drift to northern Canada, to the Mackenzie River, the longest river system in Canada at 2,635 miles when measured with its tributaries. The Mackenzie flows through one of the most remote and pristine wilderness areas remaining on Earth, draining an area larger than the entire country of Mexico. For much of its length, the river passes through territories where few humans dwell, where caribou herds migrate by the thousands and the northern lights dance across winter skies reflected in ice-covered waters. The Mackenzie remains frozen solid for 7 months of every year, its ice thick enough to support loaded trucks traveling the famous ice roads that become the only supply routes to remote communities during winter. When spring finally arrives and the ice breaks up, it does so with dramatic force. Massive ice floes crash and grind together, piling up in spectacular ice jams that can create temporary dams dozens of feet high. The river flows northward into the Arctic Ocean, carrying with it nutrients that sustain one of the world's most important marine ecosystems, where beluga whales gather in the summer months, their white bodies visible in the dark waters of the delta. Let us journey now to the Indian subcontinent, to the Brahmaputra River, whose name means son of Brahma in Sanskrit. This powerful river begins its journey in Tibet, where it's known as the Yarlung Tsangpo, flowing eastward for nearly 1,100 miles across the Tibetan Plateau. Then, in one of nature's most dramatic gestures, the river makes a stunning U-turn around the eastern end of the Himalayas, carving through mountains in a series of gorges that reach depths of over 16,000 feet, nearly 3 miles deep, making it one of the deepest canyons on Earth, even deeper than the Grand Canyon. After this dramatic turn, the Brahmaputra flows westward through India and Bangladesh for another 1,800 miles, eventually joining with the Ganges to create the world's largest river delta. During the monsoon season, the Brahmaputra becomes a force of nature unlike almost any other river on Earth. It can swell to over 12 miles wide in some places, and its flow increases so dramatically that it becomes one of the world's fastest-flowing rivers, carrying 5.3 million cubic feet of water per second at peak flow. This massive discharge of water and sediment has created hundreds of river islands, including Magellan, which at 163 square miles is one of the world's largest river islands and home to unique Hindu monasteries and a distinct culture adapted to life on shifting sands. Now, let the current carry you to West Africa, to the Niger River, the principal river of Western Africa at 2,600 miles long. The Niger follows one of the most unusual courses of any major river. It begins just 150 miles from the Atlantic Ocean in Guinea, but instead of flowing directly to the sea, it turns inland, flowing northeast into the Sahara Desert, as if drawn by some ancient magnetic force. Near the city of Timbuktu in Mali, the river creates an extensive inland delta, spreading across thousands of square miles of otherwise desert landscape, creating a wetland oasis that has supported trade, agriculture, and wildlife for millennia. After reaching its northernmost point, the Niger makes a dramatic turn southward, forming a distinctive boomerang shape before finally flowing through Nigeria to the Atlantic Ocean at the Gulf of Guinea. This unusual path means the Niger actually flows through dramatically different climate zones, from tropical rainforest to desert to savanna and back to rainforest again. The river's inland delta transforms with the seasons, expanding during floods to become one of Africa's most important wetlands, providing critical habitat for millions of migrating birds and sustaining fishing communities whose lives are timed to the river's ancient rhythms. Let us travel now to the heart of North America once more, to the Yukon River, flowing 1,980 miles from British Columbia through Yukon Territory and Alaska to the Bering Sea. The Yukon played a legendary role in the Klondike Gold Rush of 1896 to 1899, when over 100,000 prospectors attempted to reach the goldfields, and the river became their highway into the wilderness. Steamboats churned up and down its waters, carrying supplies and fortune seekers, while others built crude rafts and boats, risking the river's dangerous rapids in their desperate quest for gold. Jack London traveled these waters and immortalized the Yukon in his stories, capturing the harsh beauty and unforgiving nature of this northern wilderness. The Yukon remains one of the last great free-flowing rivers in North America, with no major dams along its main stem. It freezes completely from October through May, its ice growing thick enough that the Yukon Quest, one of the world's toughest sled dog races, crosses the frozen river multiple times during its 1,000-mile course. When the ice finally breaks in spring, the event is so significant that towns along the river hold ice pool contests, where people bet on the exact minute the ice will move. The river's breakup signals more than just changing seasons. It represents renewal, the return of salmon runs that sustain both wildlife and indigenous communities who have lived along these banks for thousands of years. Finally, as this segment draws to a close, let us visit the Seine River in France, winding 485 miles from Burgundy through the heart of Paris to the English Channel. The Seine has inspired artists, writers, and poets for centuries. Monet painted its bridges and reflections, Renoir captured Parisians boating on its waters, and countless writers have strolled its banks seeking inspiration. The river curves through Paris in gentle loops, dividing the city into the right bank and left bank, two sides with distinct characters yet forever connected by elegant bridges. 37 bridges cross the Seine in Paris alone, each with its own history and personality. The Seine has been Paris's lifeline since the city was founded over 2,000 years ago. The very name, Paris, comes from the Parisii, a Gallic tribe who settled on an island in the river, the Isle de la Cite, where Notre Dame Cathedral still stands, its foundation stones washed by Seine waters for over 850 years. Today, the river banks are UNESCO World Heritage Sites, recognizing their cultural significance to human history. As the Seine flows quietly past illuminated monuments at night, it carries with it reflections of human creativity and resilience, a gentle reminder that rivers are not just physical features of our world, but witnesses to our stories, holders of our memories, eternal companions on humanity's long journey. Rest now in the rhythm of these flowing waters, let them carry away your cares, feel yourself floating peacefully on currents that have flowed for millions of years and will flow for millions more, timeless and patient, eternal and calm. As we drift ever onward in our journey, let us travel to southern Africa, to the Zambezi River, the fourth longest river in Africa at 1,599 miles. The Zambezi flows through 6 countries, Zambia, Angola, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique, before reaching the Indian Ocean. But it is at the border between Zambia and Zimbabwe where the Zambezi creates one of nature's most awe-inspiring spectacles, Victoria Falls, known locally as Mosi Oetunya, which means the smoke that thunders. At Victoria Falls, the entire width of the river, over a mile across, plunges 355 feet into a narrow gorge, creating a curtain of water so powerful that the mist rises up to 1,300 feet into the air, visible from over 30 miles away, and the roar can be heard from 25 miles distant. During the peak flow season, between February and May, Victoria Falls discharges over 130 million gallons of water per minute, making it the largest sheet of falling water in the world. The spray creates permanent rainbows that arc across the gorge, and during full moons, a rare phenomenon occurs. A moonbow, or lunar rainbow, appears in the mist, a ghostly silver arc visible only on the clearest nights. The Zambezi continues beyond the falls, flowing through dramatic gorges before eventually widening into Lake Kariba, one of the world's largest man-made lakes, demonstrating once again how human ambition seeks to shape these ancient waterways. Let us now journey to the Indus River, flowing 1,976 miles from the Tibetan Plateau through Pakistan to the Arabian Sea. The Indus is one of the longest rivers in Asia and gave its name to an entire subcontinent, India, and to one of the world's earliest civilizations. The Indus Valley Civilization, which flourished from 3300 to 1300 BCE, built sophisticated cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa along the river's banks, with advanced drainage systems, standardized weights and measures, and urban planning that wouldn't be matched in the region for thousands of years. The Indus carries more silt than almost any other river in the world, approximately 400 million tons per year, constantly rebuilding its delta and creating new land even as the sea tries to claim it back. The river's watershed covers an area larger than France and Spain combined, and it provides water for the world's largest irrigation system, sustaining agriculture for over 90% of Pakistan's food production. Snow and glaciers in the Himalayas and Karakoram mountains feed the Indus, and climate change's impact on these ice fields threatens the water security of over 300 million people who depend on this ancient river's flow, a reminder that these waterways connect not just places, but futures. Now, let your mind travel to Eastern Europe, to the Dnieper River, the fourth longest river in Europe at 1,367 miles. The Dnieper flows through Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, where it has long been considered the country's heart and soul. In Kyiv, Ukraine's capital, the river widens to over 2 miles across, and 7 major bridges span its breadth, connecting the city's eastern and western halves. The Dnieper has been Ukraine's main transportation artery for over 1,000 years, and it was along these banks that the powerful Cossack warriors established their fortress, the Sich, becoming legendary for their fierce independence and martial skill. The Dnieper freezes for 3 to 4 months each winter, and historically, this freezing and thawing shaped the rhythm of life and commerce along its length. During World War II, the river became a major line of defense, and the Nazis destroyed the massive Dnieper hydroelectric station during their retreat, one of the largest acts of industrial sabotage in history. Today, the river has been transformed by a cascade of 6 dams that create a series of massive reservoirs, turning much of the Dnieper into what is essentially a chain of long, narrow lakes. These reservoirs generate power and control flooding, but they've also dramatically altered the river's ecology, slowing its current and warming its waters, changing forever a river that once ran wild and cold from the Valdai Hills to the Black Sea. Let us float now to South America, to the Orinoco River, flowing 1,330 miles through Venezuela and Colombia before emptying into the Atlantic Ocean. The Orinoco is remarkable for its bifurcation, a rare phenomenon where the river actually splits into two, with one branch continuing as the main Orinoco while another, called the Casiquiara Canal, flows south to join the Amazon basin. This natural canal, about 200 miles long, creates a unique connection between two of South America's greatest river systems, allowing fish and other aquatic life to migrate between these vast watersheds. The Orinoco flows through the vast grasslands of Venezuela called the Llanos, where during the wet season the river floods across millions of acres, creating temporary wetlands that attract spectacular concentrations of wildlife, capybaras, caimans, anacondas, and over 350 species of birds. When the waters recede in the dry season, these same plains become parched grasslands, and wildlife concentrates around the remaining water sources in one of nature's most dramatic seasonal transformations. The river's delta, where it meets the Atlantic, spreads across thousands of square miles, creating a maze of channels and islands that remains one of South America's wildest and least explored regions, where indigenous Warao people still live in homes built on stilts above the water, their lives intimately connected to the river's tidal rhythms. Now, journey with me to the River Jordan in the Middle East, a river that may be modest in size, only 156 miles long, but immense in spiritual and historical significance. The Jordan flows from the slopes of Mount Hermon southward through the Sea of Galilee and down to the Dead Sea, the lowest point on Earth's land surface at 1,410 feet below sea level. For Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike, the Jordan is a sacred river. It was in the Jordan that John the Baptist baptized Jesus, and for 2,000 years, pilgrims have come to its waters seeking spiritual renewal. The Jordan flows through the Great Rift Valley, part of the massive geological fault line that stretches from Syria to Mozambique. The river valley is incredibly fertile despite the surrounding desert, and humans have farmed here for over 10,000 years, making it one of the longest continuously cultivated regions on Earth. Today, the Jordan faces severe environmental challenges. So much water is diverted for agriculture and drinking water that in some years barely a trickle reaches the Dead Sea, causing that ancient salt lake to shrink dramatically. Yet the river persists, still flowing through landscapes where prophets walked and empires rose, still carrying with it the hopes and prayers of millions who see in its waters something more than mere H2O, but rather a connection to the divine, to history, to something eternal. Finally, as this segment of our journey comes to rest, let us visit the St. Lawrence River in North America, flowing 744 miles from Lake Ontario to the Gulf of St. Lawrence. The St. Lawrence is actually part of a much larger system, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway, which forms the world's longest deep-draft inland navigation system, allowing ocean-going ships to travel over 2,300 miles from the Atlantic Ocean to the very heart of the North American continent. The river drains the Great Lakes, which contain roughly 20% of the world's fresh surface water, making the St. Lawrence one of the most voluminous rivers in North America despite its relatively modest length. The St. Lawrence played a crucial role in opening North America to European exploration and settlement. French explorers used it as their highway into the continent, and the river valley became the heartland of New France. Jacques Cartier first sailed up the St. Lawrence in 1535, and the cities that grew along its banks, Montreal, Quebec City, and others, became the foundation of French-Canadian culture. Today, the river remains a vital commercial waterway, but it's also home to a surprising resident, the St. Lawrence beluga whale, a unique population of these small white whales that lives year-round in the river's estuary. These belugas are genetically distinct from their Arctic cousins, adapted over thousands of years to life in the river's mix of fresh and salt water, a reminder that rivers are not just passages through the land, but homes, entire worlds unto themselves. Breathe deeply now, and let these rivers flow through your consciousness like a gentle current, washing away tension, carrying you softly toward peaceful sleep, their ancient songs a lullaby from the very pulse of our living earth. As we continue our peaceful voyage through the world's waterways, let us travel to eastern China, to the Yellow River, known in Chinese as the Huanghe. This river, flowing 3,395 miles from the Bayan Har Mountains to the Bohai Sea, carries more sediment than any other river on Earth, approximately 1.6 billion tons per year. It is this enormous load of yellowish silt, eroded from the Loess Plateau, that gives the river its distinctive color and its name. The Yellow River is often called China's sorrow because of its devastating floods throughout history. Over the centuries, the river has changed its course dramatically at least 9 times, sometimes shifting its mouth by hundreds of miles, and major floods have claimed millions of lives. Yet the Yellow River is also known as the cradle of Chinese civilization, for it was in the fertile valleys carved by this river that Chinese culture first flourished over 5,000 years ago. Ancient farmers learned to harness the river's floods and its rich silt to grow millet and wheat, creating agricultural surpluses that allowed cities to develop and dynasties to rise. The river remains central to northern China's water supply today, though it faces severe challenges. In recent decades, sections of the Yellow River have sometimes run completely dry before reaching the sea, its waters so thoroughly diverted for agriculture and industry that this ancient waterway, which has flowed for millions of years, temporarily ceases to flow at all, a sobering reminder of the pressures humanity places on even the mightiest rivers. Let us drift now to the Lena River in Siberia, one of the great rivers of the Russian Far East, flowing 2,734 miles from the mountains south of Lake Baikal to the Laptev Sea in the Arctic Ocean. The Lena flows through some of the coldest inhabited regions on Earth, where winter temperatures can plunge below -60 degrees Fahrenheit. The river remains frozen solid for 7 to 8 months each year, and when spring finally arrives, the breakup of ice creates dramatic flooding as ice jams cause water to back up and overflow the banks. The Lena's Delta, where the river spreads into the Arctic Ocean, is one of the largest river deltas in the world, covering over 12,000 square miles, an area about the size of Belgium. This vast wetland is a crucial breeding ground for millions of migratory birds that travel here each summer from as far away as Africa and South America, drawn to the brief but incredibly productive Arctic summer when the sun barely sets and life explodes in a frantic rush to reproduce before winter returns. The Lena Basin remains largely pristine, one of the least developed major watersheds on Earth, flowing through wilderness where brown bears fish for salmon, and reindeer herds migrate across tundra that has known human footsteps for over 30,000 years. Now, let your thoughts travel to the Ganges-Brahmaputra-Meghna Delta, where multiple great rivers converge to create the world's largest river delta, covering over 41,000 square miles across Bangladesh and India. This immense delta, sometimes called the Green Delta for its lush vegetation, is crisscrossed by thousands of channels and waterways, creating an ever-shifting landscape where land and water intermingle. Over 130 million people live within this delta, making it one of the most densely populated regions on Earth, their lives intimately tied to the rhythms of monsoon and river. The delta's soil, constantly renewed by sediment from the Himalayas, is incredibly fertile, allowing farmers to grow 3 rice crops per year in some areas. But this fertility comes with risk. The delta is extremely vulnerable to flooding and cyclones, as most of the land lies only a few feet above sea level. When tropical cyclones surge in from the Bay of Bengal, their storm surges can push seawater dozens of miles inland, inundating villages and farmland. The 1970 Bola cyclone, the deadliest tropical cyclone ever recorded, killed an estimated 500,000 people in this delta region. Yet people continue to live here, adapting to floods, building homes on earthen platforms, and maintaining a culture that has learned to live with water as both blessing and threat, understanding that the delta's fertility and danger are 2 sides of the same coin. Let us journey now to the Rio Grande, called the Rio Bravo in Mexico, flowing 1,896 miles from the mountains of Colorado through New Mexico and Texas, forming the border between the United States and Mexico for 1,254 miles before reaching the Gulf of Mexico. The Rio Grande has long been more than just a river, it's a boundary, a lifeline, and a symbol. The river gives life to a desert region that receives less than 10 inches of rain per year in many places, its waters diverted through networks of canals to irrigate crops of cotton, pecans, and chili peppers that would be impossible without the river's flow. The Rio Grande flows through 3 distinct desert ecosystems, the Chihuahuan Desert, which is the largest desert in North America. Near Big Bend, the river has carved spectacular canyons through ancient limestone, creating the Santa Elena, Mariscal, and Bequiles canyons, where sheer walls rise up to 1,500 feet above the water. The river's flow has diminished dramatically in recent decades due to drought and heavy water use. At times, the Rio Grande fails to reach the Gulf of Mexico at all, its channel running dry in its lower reaches. This once mighty river, which Spanish explorers named Great River, now struggles to maintain its flow, highlighting the delicate balance between human needs and natural systems in arid lands. Now, float with me to the Rhone River in Europe, beginning its journey from the Rhone Glacier in the Swiss Alps and flowing 505 miles through Switzerland and France to the Mediterranean Sea. The Rhone is remarkable for its power. It's the most voluminous river flowing into the Mediterranean, and along its course, it drops dramatically in elevation, creating strong currents and making it an excellent source of hydroelectric power. The French have harnessed this power with a series of dams and locks that have transformed much of the Rhone into a cascade of reservoirs, generating electricity while also making the river navigable for large barges all the way from the Mediterranean to Lyon. The Rhone Valley is one of the world's great wine regions, particularly in its southern reaches where the river flows through Provence. The Mistral, a powerful cold wind that blows down the valley, can reach speeds of over 60 miles per hour, shaping the landscape and the character of the wines grown on the valley's slopes. Romans planted vineyards here over 2,000 years ago, and today, wines from Côtes du Rhône, Châteauneuf du Pape, and Hermitage are treasured around the world. Where the Rhone reaches the Mediterranean, it creates the Camargue, a vast river delta known for its wild white horses, pink flamingos, and black bulls, a unique wetland that feels more like Africa than Europe, a final reminder of the river's power to create and sustain life even as it reaches its journey's end. Let us visit now the Irrawaddy River in Myanmar, flowing 1,350 miles from the confluence of the Nmei and Mali rivers in the Himalayas southward through the heart of Myanmar to the Andaman Sea. The Irrawaddy is Myanmar's most important commercial waterway and the country's cultural heart, lined with thousands of Buddhist pagodas and temples, including the ancient temple complex at Bagan, where over 2,000 temples still stand on the river's banks, remnants of a city that once boasted over 10,000 religious structures. The Irrawaddy is one of the last major rivers in Asia without a dam on its main stem, allowing it to flow freely and maintain its natural seasonal rhythms. The river floods extensively during the monsoon season from June to October, depositing fertile silt across floodplains that have supported Myanmar's rice cultivation for centuries. The country was once known as the Rice Bowl of Asia, largely thanks to the Irrawaddy's fertile delta. The river is also home to the critically endangered Irrawaddy dolphin, a small, round-headed dolphin that lives in fresh water and is considered sacred by many local communities. These dolphins sometimes cooperate with fishermen, herding fish into nets in exchange for a share of the catch, a relationship between human and animal that has existed for generations, another reminder that rivers are not just geological features, but living communities where countless species, including humans, find their place and purpose. Finally, as this hour draws gently to a close, let us visit the Po River in Italy, the longest river in the country at 405 miles, flowing from the Cotillon Alps in the west across the broad Po Valley to the Adriatic Sea. The Po Valley is Italy's agricultural heartland and most heavily industrialized region, home to cities like Milan, Turin, and Bologna. This valley has been cultivated for over 3,000 years, since Etruscan and Roman times, and its rich soils produce much of Italy's rice, wheat, and corn, as well as supporting the dairy industry that produces Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. The Po has played a crucial role in Italian history and culture. Leonardo da Vinci studied its hydraulics and designed canal systems for it, and during World War II, the river valley became a major battlefield and the stronghold of Italian partisans fighting against fascism. Today, the Po faces environmental challenges from industrial pollution and agricultural runoff, and like many European rivers, it has been heavily modified with levees and dams. Yet on quiet evenings, when mist rises from its waters and the Alps glow pink in the sunset, the Po still evokes the timeless Italy of imagination, a river that has witnessed empire and renaissance, war and peace, flowing steadily onward as generations rise and fall along its banks. Rest now in these flowing waters, let them carry you deeper into tranquility, feel yourself floating peacefully through landscapes both real and imagined, cradled by currents that have shaped our world and will continue flowing long after we've returned to the earth from which rivers spring. As we drift deeper into our journey through the world's waterways, let us travel to the Amazon once more, but this time to explore a remarkable phenomenon known as the meeting of the waters. Near Manaus, Brazil, the dark, tea-colored Rio Negro converges with the sandy-brown Amazon River, and for approximately 4 miles, these two great rivers flow side by side without mixing, creating a visible boundary as stark as a line drawn on a map. This phenomenon occurs because the two rivers have different temperatures, speeds, and water densities. The Rio Negro flows at about 1.2 miles per hour at a temperature of 82 degrees Fahrenheit, while the Amazon flows faster, at 2.5 miles per hour, and runs several degrees cooler. Eventually, the rivers do mix, but for those extraordinary miles, you can see nature's reluctance to blend, two mighty forces maintaining their individual identities even as they journey together toward the sea. The Amazon basin contains approximately 20% of the world's fresh-flowing water, and the river's influence extends far beyond its banks. Scientists have discovered that dust from the Sahara Desert in Africa, carried across the Atlantic Ocean by trade winds, provides essential phosphorus to the Amazon rainforest. Approximately 27 million tons of dust travel this route each year, with about 22,000 tons of phosphorus fertilizing the jungle. This means that the world's largest desert is actually feeding the world's largest rainforest, a connection across oceans that reminds us how intimately linked our planet's systems truly are, how rivers are just one thread in an impossibly complex tapestry of life. Let us journey now to the Ob River in western Siberia, one of the great rivers of Russia, flowing 2,268 miles from the Altai Mountains to the Gulf of Ob in the Arctic Ocean. When measured with its principal tributary, the Irtysh, the Ob-Irtysh system becomes the seventh longest river system in the world at 3,364 miles. The Ob drains a vast area of over 1 million square miles, roughly the size of Argentina, flowing through landscapes that range from mountains and forests to vast stretches of swampland and tundra. The Ob freezes for up to 6 months each year, and its immense floodplain becomes a maze of lakes and marshes during spring thaw, creating one of the world's largest wetland systems. This wetland is a crucial breeding ground for countless waterbirds, and the river itself supports over 50 species of fish, including the Siberian sturgeon, which can live for 60 years and weigh up to 450 pounds. Indigenous peoples have lived along the Ob for thousands of years, including the Khanty and Mansi peoples, whose traditional lives as reindeer herders and fishermen have adapted to the river's harsh seasonal extremes. Today, the Ob Basin contains some of the world's largest oil and natural gas reserves, and the river has become a vital transportation route for these resources, carrying the wealth of Siberia northward while continuing its ancient role as the lifeline of a vast and unforgiving land. Now, let your thoughts travel to the Sepik River in Papua New Guinea, one of the world's last truly wild rivers, flowing 700 miles through some of the most remote and culturally diverse regions on Earth. The Sepik has no delta; instead, it flows into the Bismarck Sea through a single mouth, and it has never been bridged or significantly developed. The river meanders through lowland tropical rainforest in great looping curves, changing course frequently and creating oxbow lakes that dot the floodplain like scattered jewels. Over 250 distinct languages are spoken in the Sepik Basin, representing an extraordinary diversity of human cultures, each village with its own traditions, art forms, and spiritual practices. The river people live in stilt houses built above the waterline, and their lives revolve entirely around the river's rhythms. The Sepik region is famous for its artistic traditions, intricately carved spirit houses, elaborate masks, and ceremonial artifacts that rank among the world's great indigenous art forms. These communities have maintained their traditional ways with minimal outside influence, living as their ancestors did for thousands of years, their canoes still gliding across waters where crocodiles, some growing to 20 feet long, are both feared predators and sacred beings believed to be the ancestors of the people themselves. Let us float now to the Danube once more, but this time to explore a remarkable section known as the Iron Gates, a narrow gorge where the river cuts through the Carpathian Mountains between Serbia and Romania. Here, the Danube narrows and deepens, flowing through a spectacular canyon where cliffs rise nearly 2,000 feet above the water. The Iron Gates has been a strategic location for millennia. The Roman Emperor Trajan built a road along the gorge's cliffs in the 2nd century CE, with a canal cut through rock in places and supported by beams driven into the cliff face, an engineering marvel for its time. In the 1960s and 70s, Romania and Yugoslavia jointly constructed the Iron Gates Dam at this location, creating a massive reservoir that submerged several islands and ancient settlements, including the Roman town of Drobeta and the medieval fortress of Ada Kali. The dam generates enormous amounts of hydroelectric power for both countries, but it also fundamentally changed the river's character. What was once a treacherous rapids, feared by boat captains for centuries, is now a placid lake. On the Serbian side of the gorge, carved into the cliff face, is an enormous sculpture of the Dacian king Decebalus, created between 1994 and 2004. At 180 feet tall, it's the tallest rock sculpture in Europe, a modern monument watching over waters that have witnessed the rise and fall of empires since before recorded history began. Now, journey with me to the Fly River in Papua New Guinea, one of the largest rivers in Oceania at 650 miles long. The Fly is unique in that it has one of the most sediment-heavy loads of any river relative to its size, carrying approximately 115 million tons of sediment per year. This enormous sediment load comes partly from the OK Teddy copper mine in the river's headwaters, one of the world's most controversial mining operations, which has discharged millions of tons of tailings and waste rock directly into the river system since the 1980s. The environmental impact has been severe. The riverbed has risen by as much as 30 feet in some locations, causing widespread flooding and destroying rainforest along the banks. Fish populations have declined, and communities along the river have seen their traditional fishing grounds degraded. Yet the Fly continues to flow, adapting to this massive change imposed by human activity, its waters still carrying barramundi, sawfish, and freshwater sharks toward the sea. The river's delta, despite upstream damage, remains largely pristine, a vast wilderness of mangrove swamps and channels where saltwater crocodiles grow to monstrous sizes and communities still hunt and fish using methods unchanged for generations. A reminder that even wounded, rivers maintain their essential nature, their drive to reach the sea, their role as pathways between highlands and ocean. Let us now visit the Tagus River, the longest river in the Iberian Peninsula at 645 miles, flowing from the mountains of eastern Spain westward across the peninsula to Lisbon, Portugal, where it empties into the Atlantic Ocean. The Tagus has been a highway of history. Phoenicians, Romans, Moors, and Portuguese explorers all used this river, and Lisbon, built on the Tagus estuary, became the launching point for the Age of Discovery, where Portuguese caravels set sail to explore Africa, Asia, and Brazil, forever changing the course of world history. The Tagus flows through the heart of central Spain, passing through the historic city of Toledo, perched on a hill surrounded by the river on three sides like a natural moat. The river has been celebrated in Spanish and Portuguese literature for centuries. The Spanish poet Garcilaso de la Vega praised its beauty, and Portuguese writers have long called it the Golden River, both for the color of its waters at sunset and for the wealth that flowed through Lisbon's port. Today, the Tagus estuary is one of the most important wetlands in Europe, a protected nature reserve where flamingos wade in shallow waters and over 50,000 waterbirds overwinter each year, finding refuge in marshes where river meets ocean, fresh water mingles with salt, and the journey that began in distant mountains finally comes to rest. Finally, as this segment of our journey reaches its gentle conclusion, let us visit the Irrawaddy River in Myanmar, also known as the Irrawaddy, but this time to learn about its spiritual significance. Along the river's banks stand countless pagodas, and every evening, monks in saffron robes can be seen making their alms rounds along riverside villages. The river is considered sacred in Buddhist tradition, and many Myanmar people believe that releasing fish or turtles into the Irrawaddy brings merit and good karma. The river has witnessed Myanmar's entire recorded history. Ancient kingdoms rose and fell along its banks, and during British colonial rule, the Irrawaddy Flotilla Company operated over 600 vessels on the river, making it one of the world's largest river transport operations. Today, the river remains largely as it has been for centuries, undammed and flowing freely, its strong current still challenging boat pilots, its seasonal floods still renewing agricultural lands, its waters still carrying the prayers and hopes of millions who see in its flow not just water moving from mountains to sea, but the very essence of life itself, a liquid connection between earth and heaven, past and present, flowing eternally forward yet somehow containing all of time within its depths. Let these rivers cradle you now, their ancient currents a gentle lullaby, their stories a soft blanket of words settling over you like mist, carrying you peacefully toward the delta of sleep, where all journeys find their rest, where all waters finally come home. As we continue our tranquil voyage through the world's great waterways, let us travel to the Oder River in Central Europe, flowing 531 miles from the Czech Republic through Poland and along the border with Germany before reaching the Baltic Sea. The Oder has been a vital trade route since medieval times, connecting the interior of Europe with the Baltic ports and cities along its banks, like Wrocław in Poland and Frankfurt an der Oder in Germany, grew wealthy from the commerce that flowed upon its waters. The river forms a natural border between Poland and Germany for much of its lower course, a boundary established after World War II, and it stands as a reminder of how rivers often become the lines we draw on maps, the places where nations meet and sometimes clash. The Oder experienced one of Europe's most devastating environmental disasters in 2022, when hundreds of tons of fish suddenly died along a 300-mile stretch of the river. Scientists discovered toxic golden algae blooms, triggered by high salt levels and warm temperatures, had poisoned the water. The disaster highlighted the river's vulnerability to pollution and climate change, but also sparked an unprecedented effort to restore the river's health. Today, the Oder is slowly recovering, its resilience demonstrating that rivers, despite the damage we inflict upon them, possess a remarkable ability to heal if given the chance, their waters constantly renewed, always flowing forward, carrying away the past while nurturing hope for the future. Let us drift now to the Salween River in Southeast Asia, one of the world's longest free-flowing rivers at 1,491 miles, beginning on the Tibetan Plateau and flowing through China's Yunnan province, then forming the border between Myanmar and Thailand before reaching the Andaman Sea. The Salween is extraordinary for what it lacks. Unlike most major rivers in Asia, it has no dams along its main stem, allowing it to maintain its wild character, its seasonal floods and ebbs following patterns established over millions of years. The Salween flows through some of the world's most rugged terrain, cutting through deep gorges in the mountains where it drops thousands of feet in elevation, creating whitewater rapids that have never been fully navigated. The river basin is home to over 7 million people from diverse ethnic groups, many living in remote mountain villages accessible only by footpaths or boat. The river's undammed state is increasingly rare and precious. While development pressures grow, conservation groups and local communities fight to keep the Salween free-flowing, understanding that some rivers should remain wild, that not every waterway needs to be tamed and harnessed, that wildness itself has value beyond measure. Now, let your mind travel to the Nirmada River in central India, flowing 815 miles from the Amarkantak Plateau in Madhya Pradesh westward to the Arabian Sea. The Nirmada is one of only 3 major rivers in India that flow from east to west, and it is considered one of the 7 holy rivers in Hinduism. Pilgrims undertake a sacred journey called the Nirmada Parikrama, a circumambulation of the river that involves walking along both banks, a journey of approximately 2,000 miles that can take several years to complete. These pilgrims believe that the Nirmada is so sacred that merely seeing it can cleanse one's sins, and that the river's stones, called Narmadeshwar or Banalinga, are natural manifestations of the god Shiva. The Nirmada Valley is one of India's most fertile regions, and the river has supported agriculture and civilization for thousands of years. The valley is also geologically significant. It sits on a rift valley, a place where the Earth's crust is pulling apart, and the region experiences frequent earthquakes. The river flows through marble rocks near Jabalpur, creating a spectacular gorge where white cliffs rise 100 feet above the water, glowing in moonlight like walls of ivory. In recent decades, the Nirmada has been the focus of intense controversy over dam construction, with large-scale projects displacing hundreds of thousands of people and sparking one of India's largest grassroots environmental movements, a struggle that continues to this day over how we balance development with preservation, human needs with natural systems. Let us journey now to the Ural River in Russia and Kazakhstan, a river unique in geography and symbolism. The Ural flows 1,509 miles from the southern Ural Mountains through the Russian steppes and Kazakhstan before emptying into the Caspian Sea. What makes the Ural remarkable is that it is traditionally considered one of the boundaries between Europe and Asia. Cities along its banks are split between 2 continents, with neighborhoods on the western shore in Europe and those on the eastern shore in Asia. The Ural River was known in ancient times as the Yaik, and it was along these banks that the Cossacks established settlements, becoming legendary horsemen and warriors. The river changes character dramatically with the seasons. In spring, fed by snowmelt, it swells and floods extensively, while in summer it can shrink to a fraction of its size, with some tributaries drying up completely. The Ural supports important sturgeon populations, including the beluga sturgeon that produces the world's most expensive caviar, though overfishing and poaching have driven these ancient fish to the brink of extinction. The river flows through increasingly arid lands as it approaches the Caspian Sea, a reminder that water is life in dry regions, that rivers threading through deserts and steppes are not just geographic features but the difference between existence and emptiness. Now, float with me to the Madre de Dios River in Peru and Bolivia, a major tributary of the Amazon that flows 750 miles through pristine tropical rainforest in one of the most biodiverse regions on Earth. The Madre de Dios Basin contains an almost incomprehensible variety of life, over 1,000 species of birds, 200 species of mammals including jaguars, giant otters, and tapirs, and countless thousands of plant and insect species, many still unknown to science. The river flows through Manu National Park, one of the most protected wilderness areas in the Amazon, where scientists continue to discover new species with each expedition. The Madre de Dios is famous for its clay lakes, or colpas, where hundreds of macaws and parrots gather each morning to eat clay from exposed riverbanks. Scientists believe the birds consume clay to neutralize toxins from unripe fruits in their diet, creating spectacular displays of color and sound as scarlet macaws, blue and yellow macaws, and dozens of parrot species descend together in screeching flocks. The river itself is constantly moving. It's a meandering river that shifts its course frequently, cutting new channels and abandoning old ones, creating oxbow lakes that become isolated ecosystems where unique communities of fish and caimans evolve in isolation. This dynamic quality reminds us that rivers are not permanent features but living, moving entities that sculpt the landscape, that what appears solid and unchanging is actually fluid, constantly being born and reborn. Let us visit now the Han River in South Korea, flowing 319 miles through the heart of the country and through Seoul, the nation's capital. The Han River divides Seoul into northern and southern sections, and the riverbanks have been transformed into extensive parks where millions of Seoul's residents come to exercise, picnic, and relax. The Han River has been central to Korean history. The ancient kingdoms of Beech, Goguryeo, and Silla all fought for control of the river valley, understanding that whoever controlled the Han controlled the peninsula's heartland. During the Korean War, the Han River was a strategic objective, and several of its bridges were destroyed during the conflict. In the decades since, South Korea's rapid economic development, known as the Miracle on the Han River, transformed a war-devastated nation into one of the world's most advanced economies. Today, the river is both a symbol of this transformation and a beloved recreational space. On summer evenings, the riverbanks fill with people, and floating stages host concerts and performances. The Han story is one of resilience and reinvention, of a nation and a river both emerging from devastation to flourish once more, their fates intertwined, their futures flowing together toward an ocean of possibility. Finally, as this portion of our journey comes to its peaceful close, let us visit the Drava River in Central Europe, flowing 447 miles from the Italian Alps through Austria, Slovenia, Croatia, and Hungary before joining the Danube. The Drava is sometimes called the Amazon of Europe for the sections that remain in their natural state, a braided river with multiple channels, islands, and extensive wetlands that support incredible biodiversity. The river's floodplain forests, though much reduced from their original extent, still harbor white-tailed eagles, black storks, and otters. The Drava has been heavily modified by humans, with over 20 hydroelectric dams along its course in Austria and Slovenia, yet sections in Croatia remain relatively wild. There, conservationists work to protect the river's remaining natural character, understanding that these free-flowing sections are precious beyond measure in a Europe where almost every river has been channelized, dammed, or otherwise controlled. The Drava flows past medieval castles and through wine regions where grapes have been cultivated since Roman times, its waters connecting alpine meadows with the Great Hungarian Plain, carrying with them the snow of mountains and the dreams of the 5 nations through which it flows, a reminder that rivers connect not just places but peoples, that water flowing through multiple countries must be shared, protected, and treasured by all. Rest now in the embrace of these waters, let them carry you deeper into tranquility, feel yourself floating on currents that have no beginning and no end, eternal flows that connect all things, that carry us all toward the great ocean of sleep, where consciousness dissolves like a river meeting the sea. As we drift ever deeper into our peaceful journey, let us travel to the Orange River in southern Africa, the longest river in South Africa at 1,367 miles. The Orange River rises in the Drakensberg Mountains of Lesotho, where it begins as a crystal-clear mountain stream at over 10,000 feet elevation, then flows westward across the entire width of South Africa before emptying into the Atlantic Ocean. The river gets its name not from its color, but from the Dutch royal house of Orange-Nassau. It was named by a Dutch explorer in 1779, though ironically, the river often does run orange-brown with sediment, particularly after rains. The Orange River flows through some of the driest regions of southern Africa, and its presence transforms desert into oasis. Along its banks, vineyards produce wine, and fields of vegetables grow where otherwise only scrub and sand would exist. The river carves spectacular gorges through ancient rock, including the Augerbees Falls, where the Orange plunges 184 feet into a granite gorge in a thundering display of power. The river was also the site of South Africa's first diamond discovery in 1867, when a child found a glowing stone on the riverbank, a discovery that sparked a diamond rush and changed the region's history forever. Today, the Orange sustains millions of people and supports agriculture that would be impossible without its waters, a liquid lifeline threading through one of Africa's most arid landscapes. Let us journey now to the Snake River in the northwestern United States, flowing 1,078 miles from its source in Yellowstone National Park through Wyoming, Idaho, and Washington before joining the Columbia River. The Snake is the largest tributary of the Columbia, and together these rivers drain over 100,000 square miles of the Pacific Northwest. The Snake River carved North America's deepest river gorge, Hell's Canyon, which reaches depths of 7,993 feet, nearly 2,000 feet deeper than the Grand Canyon in some measurements, though less well known. The Snake River was crucial to the westward expansion of the United States. Pioneers following the Oregon Trail relied on the Snake as a landmark and occasional pathway, though its rapids claimed many lives and wagons. The river is also home to one of the Pacific Northwest's great ecological dramas, the migration of salmon. These remarkable fish are born in the Snake's cold tributaries, swim thousands of miles to the Pacific Ocean where they spend years feeding and growing, then return to spawn in the exact same stream where they were born, swimming against powerful currents, leaping up waterfalls, driven by an instinct so powerful they will literally destroy their bodies in the effort to reach home. Today, salmon populations in the Snake have declined dramatically due to dams that block their migration routes, and debates rage over whether some dams should be removed to save these iconic fish, a question that pits energy production and irrigation against the survival of a species that has swum these waters for millions of years. Now, let your thoughts travel to the Douro River, flowing 557 miles from north-central Spain through Portugal to the Atlantic Ocean at Porto. The Douro Valley is one of the world's oldest demarcated wine regions. In 1756, the Portuguese government officially designated the region for port wine production, making it the first such designated wine region in the world. The steep terraced hillsides of the Douro Valley, where grapes have been cultivated for over 2,000 years, are so culturally significant that UNESCO declared them a World Heritage Site. The river's name comes from the Latin durius, meaning hard or difficult, a reference to the challenging navigation the river once presented. The Douro was once wild and dangerous, with rapids that made upstream travel nearly impossible, but over the past century, a series of dams has transformed the river into a chain of placid reservoirs. Before these dams, flat-bottomed boats called rebellos would navigate the treacherous waters carrying barrels of port wine downstream from the vineyards to the storage cellars in Porto, a journey that required extraordinary skill and often cost sailors their lives. Today, cruise ships glide peacefully where rebellos once fought for survival, and the Douro Valley has become one of Europe's premier destinations, its terraced slopes golden with autumn vines, its waters reflecting centuries of human labor transforming harsh landscape into cultivated beauty. Let us float now to the Brazos River in Texas, one of the longest rivers in the United States at 1,280 miles, flowing from the high plains of the Texas Panhandle southeastward to the Gulf of Mexico. The Brazos takes its name from the Spanish brazos de Dios, meaning arms of God. Legend says that early Spanish explorers, dying of thirst on the arid plains, gave thanks to God when they finally reached the river's life-saving waters. The Brazos has been witness to Texas history. Comanche and Tonkawa peoples lived along its banks for thousands of years, Spanish missions were established near its waters, and later, Anglo settlers built ranches and farms in its fertile valleys. The Brazos is a moody river, capable of dramatic swings from drought to devastating floods. In dry years, parts of the river can shrink to a trickle or even stop flowing altogether, while in wet years, the Brazos can swell to over 20 miles wide, inundating entire towns. The river has changed its course many times throughout history, abandoning old channels and carving new ones, a reminder of its wild nature despite the dams and levees built to control it. The Brazos flows through the heart of Texas, both geographically and culturally. It's mentioned in cowboy songs and Texas poetry. It watered the cattle drives of the Old West, and it continues to provide drinking water and irrigation for millions of Texans who see in its muddy waters the essence of their state. unpredictable, powerful, and essential. Now, journey with me to the Elbe River in Central Europe, flowing 678 miles from the Czech Mountains through Germany to the North Sea. The Elbe has long been one of Europe's most important commercial waterways, connecting the industrial heartland of Germany with the North Sea ports. The river flows through Dresden, one of Germany's most beautiful cities, known as the Florence on the Elbe, for its stunning Baroque architecture reflected in the river's waters, architecture that was destroyed in World War II's devastating firebombing but has since been painstakingly rebuilt. The Elbe also flows through Hamburg, Germany's second-largest city and one of Europe's busiest ports, where the river widens into a broad estuary and massive container ships navigate channels dredged deep enough to accommodate vessels from around the world. For 45 years, the Elbe formed part of the Iron Curtain, the river marking the border between East and West Germany. Families separated by politics could stand on opposite banks and wave to loved ones they were forbidden to touch. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, the Elbe became once again a river that united rather than divided, a symbol of reunification. Today, the Elbe faces challenges from both flooding, climate change has intensified rain events in its basin, and from drought, which sometimes makes the river too shallow for commercial navigation, highlighting how even Europe's most managed rivers remain subject to nature's unpredictable power. Let us visit now the Magdalena River in Colombia, South America, flowing 949 miles from the Andes Mountains through the heart of Colombia to the Caribbean Sea. The Magdalena is Colombia's principal river, and for centuries it was the main transportation route into the country's interior. Steamboats would carry passengers and cargo upstream from the coastal ports, a journey that could take weeks against the river's current. Gabriel Garcia Marquez immortalized the Magdalena in his novel, Love in the Time of Cholera, describing the river's steamboats and the life that flourished along its banks. The Magdalena Valley is also one of the most biodiverse regions in South America, home to species found nowhere else on Earth. The river once teemed with manatees, caimans, and countless fish species, though populations have declined due to pollution and overfishing. The valley has also been scarred by decades of armed conflict. Colombia's long civil war was fought partly along the Magdalena's banks, and many communities suffered violence and displacement. Today, as peace slowly returns, there are efforts to restore both the river's ecology and the communities that depend on it, to heal waters that carry not just silt and sediment but also memories of suffering and hopes for renewal, a river working to cleanse itself and the nation through which it flows. Finally, as this segment of our journey reaches its gentle conclusion, let us visit the Guadiana River, forming much of the border between Spain and Portugal as it flows 508 miles to the Gulf of Cadiz. The Guadiana is one of the Iberian Peninsula's great rivers, though much of its course runs through relatively arid regions where water is precious and contested. The river's name comes from the Arabic Wadi Ana, meaning river of ducks, a reminder of the centuries when Moorish civilization flourished in Iberia. The Guadiana has a curious feature. For 13 miles of its course, it disappears underground, flowing through a subterranean channel through limestone bedrock, a phenomenon known as a cryptory extreme. This underground section has given rise to legends and folklore, stories of a river that dies and is reborn, that descends into the earth like a soul journeying to the underworld before emerging again into sunlight. The Guadiana's valley is dotted with cork oak forests. This region produces much of the world's cork, and white villages with red-tiled roofs perch on hillsides overlooking the river. In summer, the river shrinks to a series of pools connected by narrow channels, while in winter, it can flood dramatically, a reminder of the ancient rhythms that water follows, cycles of abundance and scarcity that humans have built their lives around for thousands of years. Let these rivers carry you now deeper into peace, their stories becoming dreams, their waters washing away all tension, all worry, leaving only the gentle sound of current moving toward the sea, eternal and soothing, timeless and calm. As we approach the final stretches of our tranquil journey through the world's rivers, let us travel to the Yalu River in East Asia, flowing 491 miles along the border between North Korea and China before emptying into the Yellow Sea. The Yalu has been a boundary river for centuries, marking the edge of the Korean peninsula, and its name comes from the Manchu word meaning border river. The Yalu is perhaps most famous for the bridges that cross it, particularly the Sino-Korean Friendship Bridge, built in 1943, which still carries road and rail traffic between the two countries, and the broken remains of an older bridge that stands beside it, its span destroyed during the Korean War and left as a monument. The Yalu freezes in winter, and during the Korean War, Chinese troops crossed the frozen river by the hundreds of thousands to enter the conflict, a moment that changed the course of the war and of history. Today, the river remains one of the world's most sensitive borders. Chinese tourists visit border towns like Dandong to peer across the narrow waters into one of the world's most isolated nations, where North Korean villages and guard posts are visible on the opposite shore. The Yalu is also important for hydroelectric power, with several dams along its course jointly operated by China and North Korea. The river carries within its flow the tension of divided peoples, the weight of history, the hopes for eventual reconciliation, its waters flowing impartially between two nations, caring nothing for politics or ideology, simply following gravity's pull toward the sea as it has for millions of years. Let us drift now to the Vistula River in Poland, the longest river in the country at 651 miles, flowing from the Beskidy Mountains in southern Poland northward through the heart of the nation to the Baltic Sea. The Vistula flows through Warsaw, Poland's capital, and through Krakow, one of Europe's most beautiful medieval cities. For centuries, the Vistula was Poland's main transportation artery. Timber, grain, and goods would float down the river to the Baltic ports of Gdansk, where they would be shipped throughout Europe. The Vistula has witnessed all of Poland's tumultuous history: invasions, partitions, world wars, and finally independence. During World War II, the Germans destroyed all of Warsaw's bridges across the Vistula during their retreat, and the river became a defensive line in the final battles. Today, the Vistula is one of Europe's few remaining major rivers that flows largely unimpeded by dams. It's sometimes called the last wild river of Europe, though this wildness comes with costs, as the river can flood catastrophically. The Vistula's broad, braided channel supports important wildlife, including Europe's largest population of white-tailed eagles, and there are ongoing debates about how to balance flood control with ecological preservation, a challenge facing rivers worldwide as we try to protect both human communities and the natural systems that sustain all life. Now, let your mind travel to the Fly River once more, but this time to learn about the remarkable journey of its water. The Fly River in Papua New Guinea flows through one of the wettest places on Earth. Some areas of its basin receive over 400 inches of rain per year, more than 30 feet of rainfall. This incredible precipitation means the river carries an enormous volume of water relative to its length, and its flow can increase dramatically and unpredictably as tropical storms dump rain across its watershed. The Fly River Delta is home to traditional communities who build their houses on stilts and move seasonally with the river's floods and ebbs. These people have an intimate knowledge of the river's moods, knowing which channels will flood first, where fish will gather during different tides, and how to read the water's color and flow to predict changes. They travel in dugout canoes that they carve from massive trees, navigating channels that shift from year to year as the river deposits sediment and changes course. For these communities, the river is not just a waterway but a living entity, a provider and sometimes a destroyer, something to be respected and appeased through ritual and prayer, a reminder that for much of human history and still today in many places, rivers are not resources to be managed but forces to be lived with, adapted to, and honored. Let us journey now to the Garonne River in southwestern France, flowing 357 miles from the Spanish Pyrenees through the famous wine region of Bordeaux before meeting the Atlantic Ocean at the Gironde estuary. The Garonne has shaped the culture and economy of southwestern France for millennia. The Romans established cities along its banks, medieval merchants grew wealthy from trade carried on its waters, and the wines of Bordeaux traveled down the Garonne to waiting ships that would carry them to England, Holland, and beyond. The Garonne is subject to a remarkable phenomenon called a tidal bore, known locally as le mascaret, where the incoming tide from the Atlantic creates a wave that travels up the river, sometimes reaching heights of over 6 feet. This wave can travel for miles upstream, and surfers and kayakers now ride these tidal bores, balancing on a wave that moves steadily inland, a fusion of ocean and river, salt water pushing against fresh. The Garonne Valley is incredibly fertile, producing not just wine but fruits, vegetables, and the corn used to fatten the geese that provide foie gras. The river embodies the French art of living well. Its waters sustain agriculture that produces some of the world's finest foods and wines, while its banks provide settings for leisurely meals and conversations that stretch long into warm summer evenings, life lived at the pace of a river's gentle flow. Now, float with me to the Red River of the South in the United States, flowing 1,360 miles along the border between Texas and Oklahoma before turning south through Louisiana to join the Mississippi River system. The Red River gets its distinctive color from the red clay and silted erodes from the soft soils of its basin, giving the water a rusty, brick-red hue, especially after rains. This river was the borderland of the American frontier, the boundary between Spanish, French, and later American territories, a contested region where empires met and sometimes clashed. The Red River was also the route of the famous Texan General Sam Houston's strategic retreats and advances, and during the Civil War, the river valley saw significant fighting, including the Red River Campaign of 1864. The river has always been difficult to navigate. It's shallow, winding, and prone to log jams. In the 19th century, a massive logjam called the Great Raft stretched for over 160 miles along the river, a tangled mass of logs, trees, and debris that had accumulated over centuries, blocking navigation and creating swamps and lakes. It took decades of work to finally clear the Great Raft, opening the river to steamboat traffic. Today, the Red River continues to shape the landscape, depositing its red sediment, flooding periodically, and serving as home to alligator gar, primitive fish that can grow to 10 feet long and weigh 300 pounds, living fossils that have swum these muddy waters largely unchanged for 100 million years. Let us visit now the Oder River once more, but this time to explore its remarkable recovery and the wildlife that depends on it. Despite the 2022 ecological disaster, the Oder supports an impressive array of life. Over 40 species of fish inhabit its waters, including pike, perch, and catfish, some growing to enormous sizes in the river's deeper pools. The Oder's floodplain forests and wetlands, though greatly reduced from their historic extent, still provide crucial habitat for beavers, which have made a remarkable comeback after being hunted nearly to extinction. European beavers, which can weigh up to 65 pounds and live for 20 years, are ecosystem engineers. Their dams create wetlands that support countless other species. Along the Oder, beavers have built extensive lodge systems, and their activities help slow floodwaters and improve water quality by creating natural filtration systems. The river is also home to white storks, majestic birds with wingspans over 7 feet that nest on chimneys and rooftops in villages along the river. These storks migrate to Africa each winter, traveling thousands of miles, but they return faithfully each spring to the Oder Valley, their presence considered a sign of good luck and a reminder that rivers are not just local features but nodes in global networks, connecting disparate ecosystems, enabling journeys that span continents. Finally, as our long journey through the world's rivers draws to its peaceful close, let us visit the Clutha River in New Zealand, the country's largest river by volume, flowing 210 miles from Lake Wanaka through the mountains and valleys of the South Island to the Pacific Ocean. The Clutha drains the southern Alps, fed by glaciers and snowmelt, and its waters are remarkably clear and cold, tinted turquoise by glacial flour, finely ground rock particles suspended in the water that scatter light in beautiful ways. The Clutha has the highest discharge of any river in New Zealand, carrying more water than any other river in Australasia relative to its length. The river flows through dramatic landscapes of mountains and gorges, including the Cromwell Gorge, now partially submerged beneath Lake Dunstan, a reservoir created by the Clyde Dam. Before European settlement, Maori lived along the Clutha, fishing for native species like the giant kakapo and gathering jade from the riverbed. They called the river Maruo, meaning the surface current is fast, a perfectly descriptive name for a river that can flow with surprising speed despite its broad, braided appearance. Today, the Clutha is famous for adventure tourism. Jet boats race through its shallow braids, rafters navigate its rapids, and fishermen cast for brown and rainbow trout in its cold, clear waters. The river valley produces stone fruits, cherries, apricots, and peaches, that thrive in the hot, dry summers despite the river's cold waters, creating a paradox of ice-fed streams flowing through sun-baked orchards. The Clutha represents New Zealand itself, wild and beautiful, powerful yet fragile, a landscape where ancient forces still shape the land, where glaciers grind mountains into sand and rivers carry that sand to the sea, building new land even as they erode the old, an endless cycle of creation and destruction, of renewal and change. And so our journey through the world's rivers comes to rest, like water finally reaching the ocean, like a traveler arriving home. We have floated through 100 stories, across every continent, through deserts and rainforests, mountains and plains, past ancient cities and pristine wilderness. We have learned that rivers are more than water flowing downhill. They are the lifeblood of our planet, the arteries that connect highlands to oceans, the threads that weave ecosystems together, the stages upon which human history has unfolded for thousands of years. Rivers have shaped civilizations, carved canyons, sustained billions of people, and witnessed all of our triumphs and tragedies while flowing impartially onward, caring nothing for our concerns yet supporting all life. They are ancient beyond comprehension yet renewed with every raindrop, permanent features of geography yet constantly changing course, powerful enough to move mountains yet vulnerable to our actions. As you drift now towards sleep, carried on these gentle currents, remember that you too are made mostly of water, that the same minerals that flow in rivers flow in your blood, that you are connected to these waterways in ways both physical and spiritual, that when you drink water that has flowed through rivers for billions of years, that has been rain and ice, stream and ocean, vapor and cloud, cycling endlessly through this beautiful blue planet we call home. Let the rivers carry you now into dreams, their ancient songs a lullaby, their eternal flow a comfort, their stories a gift. Rest peacefully, knowing that while you sleep, rivers continue their journey to the sea, as they have since the first rains fell, as they will until the sun grows cold, flowing, always flowing, patiently carrying the world toward tomorrow. Sleep well.